Before Beverly was its own town, it was once part of the town Salem. Beverly was first settled in 1626 when it was still part of Salem. It was founded by a man by the name of Roger Conant, who had also founded Salem. Beverly wasn't officially settled until 1668 because of religious differences between Roger Conant and the governor of Massachusetts Bay Colony, John Endicott. John Hale, who was often called Reverend Hale, was the first minister of the First Parish Church of Beverly. On September 20th, 1667, he was ordained the first minister and began preaching at the church in 1668. After John's first wife had died, he remarried a woman named Sarah Noyes. In 1692, she was accused of witchcraft. To challenge legal precedents, during the trial, John Hale wrote a book titled A Modest Inquiry into the Native of Witchcraft. He had written the book in an attempt to stop the accusing of witchcraft upon people and to explain what happened to his wife. Within his book, he talked about the trials that took place during 1692 and stated that people had gone too far. And even though Reverend Hale wrote this book as the trials were taking place, it wasn't published until 1702, after his death. In 1668, the people of Beverly chose John Hale as their minister. That same year, he began preaching at the church. After they had chosen him as a minister, they got permission to break away from Salem. The Hale House, originally called the Hale Farm, was built by John Hale himself with help from the townspeople. Because John Hale was such a beloved figure, he was able to keep the home within his family beyond his years as a minister. The original house was built with 2 rooms on the first floor and 2 rooms on the second floor. Additions to the house would be put on later. In the first room of the house, that faces the backyard, shows where the original front door was and where the worn piece of granite was used as a step. Because of this, many people believe that the street used to run along the back of the house. This room was also used as the family's main sitting area, and it was where Reverend Hale had written his first book. There was also a staircase that led to the top floor. In the second room of the house, there was a large fireplace. Because this was the warmest room in the house, the family mostly sat in this room in the colder months. They also used it for cooking. Later on, there was an addition added, and they put in a large window with sitting room. From what records show, Hale was allowed to cut down just enough timber for additions to add on to his house. In the third room addition, it shows the exposed wooden walls with limited wallpaper. This shows how there was no insulation put into the house, and the wallpaper was just put on to cover up the wooden boards. Inside the cabinet in the third room, at the top, there's an intricate design. This was used to show signs of wealth. Out of the third room is the main staircase and the front door that were created when they added on to the house. In the first bedroom belonging to John Hale shows his bed with a hook above it. This was where mosquito netting once went due to the numerous amounts of bugs that would enter the house at night when the windows were open during the summer. By the bedside there was a heating pot used in the winter. It was filled with hot coals from the fire and was placed under the mattress for warmth. The closets in the bedrooms were very small, but they mainly used a trunk at the end of the bed for storage of blankets and clothing. The next room in between the 2 bedrooms was a small, skinny room. It was used either as an office for Reverend Hale or for the kids as a playroom. The next bedroom on the second floor was a bedroom for his children. All the kids had to share one bed, which meant they had more warmth in the winter, but when one kid got sick, they all got sick. A later addition to the second floor was a guest bedroom. This room used straw matting on the floor that was used to keep the house cool in the summer. In the 1880s, Beverly finally got town water, and because the Hales and their descendants were praised, they were one of the first to receive it. After John Hale had passed away, his later descendants, the Bancrofts, used his home as their summer house. They lived in Boston year-round, but when it got too hot in the summer, they came and stayed in the Hale house. When the Bancrofts were not occupying the house, they rented it out to tenant farmers who helped keep their house looking nice. The Bancrofts eventually decided to move to the Hale house as their year-round home. Because the citizens of Beverly wanted his descendants to always stay there, they continuously gave them land, and eventually they accumulated hundreds of acres over the years. This is the reason why the house was eventually called the Hale Farm. Over time, the condition of the house became worse and worse. It had to be fixed because it was resting on no support, and cracks had formed in the walls from the house setting. The Bancrofts continued to own the house for the next 80 years. It was finally sold by John Hale's great-granddaughter to the Historical Society for $15,000. Only the house and a few acres were sold, though. A vast majority of the hundreds of acres and all the furniture was auctioned off before the house was even sold. The Historical Society still owns the Hale House today, along with the 2 acres of land that were sold to them.